first things that in the book, and it's the opening story that took me almost to my knees, was the grand review of the armies. And that whole story, when we think about our armed forces and how many black men and women we have lost on behalf of this nation, protecting this country, and some of the things that they went through before and after that review was deplorable. How did you find that story in 1865?
So, I mean, I knew nothing about the Grand Review before I really kind of stumbled upon this. Mm-hmm. You know, what I was doing was going back in history to learn about prior efforts, to use that as ammunition to, you know, to Congress and anybody else who would listen as to why we should do this.
Okay.
And so I learned that the inspiration for the people who began this was the 50th anniversary of the Civil War Victory March, and they wanted to honor the black Union veterans who were going to participate in this reenactment 50 years later, because those black Union soldiers had not been invited to participate in the original Victory March at the end of the Civil War. And that was just astounding to me, mm-hmm. that there was this 2-day march where they shut down the whole city. They shut down the federal government. The most important trial, one of the most important trials in the country's history was going on, which was the trial of the conspirators in the assassination of President Lincoln.
Right.
They even shut that trial down for 2 days, and along with everything else, so that they could have this massive parade where 200,000 soldiers marched from the Capitol past the White House, 100,000 each day. It took, 6-7 hours each day for all of those soldiers to march. Newspapers guesstimated that if they had lined all of those soldiers up in a single file line, they'd stretch all the way from Washington, D.C. to Richmond, Virginia, which might be an exaggeration, but there was a lot of soldiers.
There's a lot of soldiers.
And there was not a single black combat soldier that participated in that march. They didn't invite any of the U.S. colored troop regiments to participate. And I just found that astounding.
Disgusting.
And, black troops had played such a pivotal role.
Major.
In helping the Union win, and they had been killed at a disproportionate rate. They had been, treated horribly by Confederates if they were captured. They weren't given, prisoner of war treatment. They were often just basically lynched at the conclusion of a battle if the Confederates won. And so they had so much at stake, obviously, and yet they weren't allowed to participate in. They weren't even given that minor, acknowledgement,
right,
of their contributions,
right,
or any kind of thanks or anything else. Mm-hmm. And that was just amazing. And the book talks about how, there was, more salt was rubbed in the wounds than just that. Because at the same time as that parade, there were stories in newspapers all across the country that were false of basically, insubordination and a planned revenge attack by black soldiers on Confederate prisoners that had to be put down by force. And it was in all the newspapers, and it made these black soldiers look like that they were just vengeful and didn't follow orders and had to be shot and killed so that they wouldn't just massacre all of these Confederate veterans. And the story was completely false.
Where did you find that story?
It was on the front page of the New York Times, and then in pretty much every other newspaper, right at the same time that they were reporting the Grand Review. So so on the one
So trying to justify why they weren't there.
That's one theory, and and other people thought that it was just to besmirch
Yes.
the black veterans in general because the veterans wanted citizenship.
Right.
And the African American community in general wanted citizenship. The view was, okay, the unions won the war, so give us all the rights of citizenship. And then there were those who were actively trying to say that black people weren't worthy of citizenship. Well, this was one way, perhaps, to make that argument by showing that these black soldiers were just going to massacre people.
It's horrible. So as you were progressing, like in the early 1900s, you also started to see that there were people who were really talking about a national memorial association to really dedicate to those soldiers and sailors, those black soldiers and sailors.
Yes. So 1915, after this commemoration march at the 50th anniversary of the Civil War, there had been a group of African Americans in the Washington area who formed an organization to support those veterans coming to D.C. because the white veterans organization wasn't going to invite the black veterans to the balls or to participate in the social activities. They said, if you want to have social activities for the black veterans, do it yourself. So this committee was formed called the Colored Citizens Committee, and they got people to open up their homes because these veterans coming from all over the country couldn't stay in the hotels.
Right.
So they did this massive effort to open up people's homes, to get people to donate automobiles or otherwise, take people around and care for them and entertain them and all of that. And then when it was all over, they said, this is ridiculous. We should have a permanent physical national memorial in Washington to honor black soldiers and sailors. And within a couple of years, they said, we've contributed more than just in the military.
Right.
We've contributed in every aspect of American life.
Right. That's right.
So we essentially need a museum. Mm-hmm. And that's how it began.
Mm-hmm. When we sit down and we look at this, and all of because we don't have much time. I could have had you on for the whole show. You're going to have to come back. This is just crazy. But when we sit down and we talk about the necessity of having this, some people have said, well, we have our own museums or a black museum in our own communities. We have something in Philly. We've got something here. Why was it so important to have something that would be part of the nation's capital?
I think because the Smithsonian is called the nation's attic.
Okay.
And is really the record keeper for the nation. And why shouldn't